The ICG is a community of independent market researchers who collaborate, share knowledge and experience to deliver value to fellow members and to clients. If you're an independent researcher and want to connect with over 400 like-minded people, gain access to our knowledge base, get inspiration, support and advice from other members, then why don't you join us? Either visit our website, theicg.co.uk/join, or email us at membership@theicg.co.uk. If you're a client company and want to connect with the largest resource of expert independent researchers in the world, with proven expertise across all markets, categories and techniques, then why don't you contact us? Either visit our website, theicg.co.uk/connect, or email us, connect@theicg.co.uk. If you're a supplier and want to promote yourself to over 400 buyers of research services, then why don't you contact us? Either visit our website, theicg.co.uk/advertise, or email us at admin@theicg.co.uk. The ICG, Expert Independent Researchers. Toluna is a leading digital insights company, and our approach is unique. We partner with agencies to help make clearer business decisions using Toluna.com, our member community, and it's this direct connection that is truly empowering. With over 9 million members across the world, Toluna uses deep profiling to allow highly specific respondent targeting. Market research professionals need to offer clients more, and Toluna is an ideal partner. We are highly innovative, and our services are designed for market research professionals to add value and depth to their projects. To find out more, contact Toluna via email, by phone, or visit our website.
Okay, thank you very much. Welcome everyone. This is rather a unique opportunity to speak for a long time with having nobody to interrupt me, which is great. So who am I? I like to describe myself in terms of who I'm inspired by, and this might be something you could think about. I was inspired by Liz Nelson, my first boss, Bill Schlackman, who was, I think, my third boss, and Wendy Gordon as well. Yes, I am that old. And Ruby Wax. I've worked agency side, client side, on freelance, interim contracts over the last 25 years, mostly mother and child related, toys, games, baby, TV and publishing. I'm also an NLP trainer and kids coach, and I work mostly with children, teenagers, parents and teachers. I ran a Montessori nursery school for 7 years, and I'm the author of a number of books, as Arthur said, Teach Yourself, Learn Market Research in a Week, which makes everybody laugh, really. The NLP workbook, Be a Happier Parent with NLP, Secrets of Success in Brand Licensing, the Self-Esteem Workbook, Secrets of the NLP Masters, and the Engaging NLP series of workbooks. So I should move this screen down. I also write as Judy B as a children's writer, and I've written the Queens of Africa books that go with the Queens of Africa dolls, and Jane and Jake's Adventures to Awesome, and the Danny books. So what will you learn today? I want to teach you some basic NLP techniques in order to feel confident, stay focused, feel motivated, be able to say no, be fully present, command respect, know who you are, know what you want, and how to get it. So NLP, now this isn't about how to sell NLP to a client, add it into a proposal, or sort of switch it on when you moderate a group. It's actually about living it every day. It's about thinking in a different way, using beliefs that work, being solution focused. If it's possible to do a thing, then you can do it. Being flexible and being prepared to make mistakes as part of the learning process. Being the difference you want in others, and taking responsibility for change. So let me tell you first just a little bit of history about NLP, and then I want to tell you about the beliefs of excellence. NLP was developed in the 70s by Richard Bandler and John Grinder, who studied excellence in order to code it so they could replicate it. And these here are the beliefs of excellence that they came up with as their code. So I'll just take you through those. The map is not the territory. How things are perceived by your respondent is how they are, and that's an end to it. There's no failure, only feedback. Learn from what didn't go well and look on these mistakes as free learning, a gift. If you spot it, you've got it. What you admire and respect in others, you have as well. That's how you recognize it. If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. It's you that has to do something different. We've all heard of that one, haven't we? You already have all the resources you need, and one of them is modelling, which we'll go on to talk about. The meaning of the communication is the effect, and you cannot not communicate. Behind every behaviour is a positive intention. The mind and body are one, and there is a solution to every problem. So, how do we turn limiting beliefs into resourceful beliefs? Because these can really block your path to success as an independent consultant. Be aware of these when you hear one slipping out. They sometimes sound like, I can't. Sometimes they look like rounded shoulders, lowered eyes, a sad look. They feel like you've got a brick wall in front of you, or maybe a knot in your stomach. Limiting beliefs I've heard from my peers are, they, clients, won't want to talk to me. I can't bother them. I won't finish this report on time. It's feast or famine. This will be difficult to recruit. But wait, it was your mind that put that wall or that knot there. You can use your mind to get rid of it. Imagine you could push that wall away, push it down, turn it into a pizza and munch a hole in it. Can you untie that knot? Ask yourself, what if they do want to talk to me? What do I need to do to finish this report in time? What if the famine was actually a chance to catch up with friends or get my accounts up to date? How could I make recruitment easier? Here's how you anchor a resourceful belief. Decide on which belief you'd like, and then where in your life do you hold that belief? Maybe it's in your sport, maybe it's at home, at work, or a craft, or a hobby, or even in your cooking. Associate into it when you actually have that belief. See what you see, hear what you hear, and do what you're doing. And then squeeze your earlobe and live that belief as if it's happening right now. Then as it passes, you need to just jiggle around a bit to break state, and then do the whole thing again. And if you do the thing 3 times with the different examples of that belief, you'll actually have that anchored and associated with that squeeze of the earlobe. Then what you do is you future pace it. You imagine then that situation happening, but with the anchor in place. So what are the implications for research? Think of something you do really well, with excellence. It could be anything, doing a cartwheel, remembering facts such as people's name, making a cake, shopping. What's the belief you have about doing that thing the way you do it, with excellence? I believe that ... Where in your life as a researcher could that belief be really useful? For example, I'm pretty good at windsurfing. I have great balance and I rarely fall off my board, even in waves on the sea. My belief is this: I can anticipate, prepare my body, and I know I will stay upright. I imagine myself sailing on. An unresourceful belief in this case would be, I will fall in the water. How can I use this belief? Windsurfing, like most things, is a metaphor. By preparing myself and imagining a good outcome, even when the situation gets choppy, I will continue on my path. I won't fall in, and when I do, I will jump back on and keep going. So modelling makes NLP different from other therapies. Modelling is the study of the structure of excellence. It's about process, not content. Imagine that you could code someone's excellence in a specific skill and acquire that for yourself. It's important that you model what is observable rather than what you've interpreted or assumed. What you observe must be observable by others, so it's something that they do. Keep it clean, avoid making assumptions about why they do it. You might think it's because it's important to them, but that isn't observable. This is about process, what happens first, second, third. And you may want several models of excellence of one thing, because ideally you need to be able to question your model. So who are your models of excellence? Who does what you want to be able to do with excellence? Let me give you some examples of some of mine. I don't know whether you all know them, but Jenny Murray, she's the host of Woman's Hour, and I believe that she listens with excellence. She gains rapport quickly. She asks great questions and she achieves insight, surely something that we want as qualitative researchers. Chris Evans too, with his mystery guest on Radio 2 in the morning, he interviews with humour. He asks brave questions, he challenges, he puts himself in the listener's shoes, and he does it to order, just as we have to do. Victoria Beckham, love her or hate her, she does what she does with 100% eye to detail, whether it to be as a mother, a singer, a fashion designer, and she doesn't care what people think. Ruby Wax, funny, intelligent, fights for better understanding of mental health, stands up for women. Angelina Jolie, commitment to charity work, excellent actress, great mother of 6 and puts her health first. So how do we use these models? We need to extract the exact it we want to model and its associated belief of excellence. So what do you do well? There's a skill in the smallest thing that you take for granted. For example, back myself again, I can do a cartwheel. So this means I don't mind looking silly. I have confidence in my physical strength. I can see the world from a different angle, upside down. I know I will end up the right way up on my feet. So how can I relate this to myself as a researcher? I don't mind taking a chance, phoning a client I don't know. I believe all will work out fine. The worst outcome would just be that I might feel stupid, and that would be fine. I have the ability to not be okay for a short while. I can not know and then know. Failure is part of the process. Now you might want to have a go at this. You could be wanting to model something that's work-related, such as leading a team, running a meeting, moderating a focus group, writing a proposal, presenting brilliantly. Think about what you'd like to model. It needs to be quite small chunk, and I'll come on to this later. For example, if you wanted, say, Andy Murray's serve, which bit is going to make the difference for your serve? The throw up, the bounce, the way you move your racket, how you hit it? Like any scientific experiment, you need to choose one element and change that. Keep everything else constant. It doesn't matter what you model at first, just practice by starting a modeling exercise. Maybe model the way a friend tells a joke, how the barman notices who is next, how a teacher remembers children's names, how your hubby seems to be able to ignore the untidy living room, how your teenager is able to argue every point with you. Modeling what someone does that annoys you is an excellent way to gather a new skill, because how someone does something annoying can be switched to a skill. For example, being able to ignore distractions, such as mess, is also focus for work, which, let's face it, we all need. So how do we model? We think about what someone does with excellence and say, if I wanted to model the way Chris Evans in the moment knows how to start the mystery guest interview, I've already chunked it down to a specific interview, the mystery guest, because in some way that's a bit like what we do. I've also selected the start, because my assumption, and I am prepared to be wrong, is that how an interview starts will determine how it goes. We need to focus on the process. What do you notice? What do you see? Well, it's a radio program, so probably not much. Auditory then, what do you hear? What are the patterns? You listen to as many starts of the mystery guest on Radio 2 as possible and note the patterns. What words does he use? What tone? Are there similarities? Try out some of the first questions he uses. Do they work for you too? If yes, try out others. Which work best? If not, maybe it's not the actual question. Could it be the tone? Try that. Find out what his belief of excellence is. You might want to guess and experiment or research, read his book, test out hypotheses. Let's go on now to the neuro of neuro-linguistic programming. Neuro is actually what we bring to the table, basically. It's how we think, why we think what we think, our memories and experiences, our values, our beliefs, who we are, who we want to be. It's a bit like the question we sometimes ask in focus groups, you know, if that person were a brand, what sort of person they would be, but you're the brand as a qualitative researcher. So if I was a brand, I would be, I'd say Waitrose, a bit posh, full of yummy things, different, I care about my customers, we're all in this together, open, honest, want the best for you. What brand would you be? And how are you communicating your brand through social media, through emails, through meetings? So the implications for research are these. What beliefs do we have before we start any research? For example, would we buy this product? What would have to be true about us for us to be a consumer of this product? What values do we bring to the research? For example, they might be honesty and integrity, giving 100%, caring about the client, caring about the respondents, taking responsibility for a job well done. So what beliefs would be useful and resourceful? Remember, you can actually change beliefs. I mean, you haven't, at one time when you were younger, you probably believed in Father Christmas. I guess you don't now. We do actually change our beliefs, and they're not like values that tend to stick with us. So what beliefs would be useful and resourceful? Well, curious about what makes these consumers want to consume the product would be a good place to start. Believing that we can uncover nuggets of insight when we focus on the task. Believing that each and every respondent in their own way has something valuable to offer us, and that when we tease it out of them, we will all move forward in our understanding. Believe that we are excellent at what we do, and even when the dynamics may get sticky, when it doesn't seem to be going as well as we'd like, we are resourceful and can immediately change the pace and create the great dynamic that we want. So linguistic, the second one. So this is about how we communicate, both verbally and non-verbally. The words we choose, how we present ourselves, how we convey our thoughts and feelings to the outside world, and how we process what we experience. Do we tend to talk in terms of what we do want or what we don't want? Are we towards or away from? I think it's fairly well known that if you go for what you do want, you're going to be more likely to get it than you're trying to avoid what you don't want. Are you small chunk or big chunk? Do you focus on the detail or on the big picture? Are you choices or process? Do you like to have options or do you like to have a tick list? Do you focus on the past, the present, or the future? Are you passive or active? You need to be aware both of those for yourself, but also for the respondents in your focus groups or that people you're working with in your team, your clients. The language we choose to express ourselves, the visual, the auditory, and the kinesthetic. So what are our implications for research here? What we say and how we say it communicates something. Remember, we can't not communicate. We communicate by what we wear, the way we introduce ourselves, how we sit, how we respond, the words we use, what we pay attention to, and what we ignore. Respondents have already decided whether they like us and whether they will cooperate with the task within the first few minutes. It's a bit like a blind date for us too. What do we expect from each person? How are we going to establish rapport? How are we going to get what we need from them? So what's the answer? I think it's actually to say as little as possible, to use clean language, to reflect back their words with a questioning look. Tell me more about. In what way? What is there about the, and what kind of a is that? So programming, these are the patterns we run, how we manage our life, the things we do again and again. There is a sequence, an event, for example, an email asking us if we have availability to do a project. Maybe it's a specific hole on the golf course, a smell, words, sounds, the sight of something. This triggers a thought or a feeling, perhaps it could be conscious or unconscious. Think, is this resourceful or limiting? What would a resourceful response look, sound or feel like? Do you filter the event, perhaps? Do you generalize? Do you say, why do they always give me the low budget projects? Do you distort? This must mean their usual supplier doesn't want the job. Do you delete? They don't think I can manage large projects. Do you have a set way of doing things, or do you adapt to your client's preferences? Are you focusing on what works and how it works, or are you getting distracted by the content? So again, implications for research. Think of a thing that happens that you'd like to change. Remember, it's you that has to make the change, both in terms of your belief and how you respond. What's your current limiting belief? Check whether it is a generalization, a deletion or distortion, and reword it so that it's a more accurate reflection of what happens. What belief would be more resourceful? I want to believe that ... Where do you hold that belief currently? Anchor it and future pace it. For example, I've often heard colleagues say, oh, it's feast or famine in this business. This is a generalization because it isn't always like that. It's also deleting the fact that we do actually choose our own working hours and we have holidays. It's quite a negative and limiting belief. So how could we reframe? Feast and famine are extremes, whereas what we really mean is that sometimes we're incredibly busy and sometimes we're wondering if the phone line is down or the internet is disconnected. So how could we reframe that downtime? This could be time to read, exercise, file things, do the accounts, contact clients we haven't spoken to for a while, beef up our social media. How do you react to problems? Do you fight? Is there flight involved? Do you freeze? I mean, we all have bad days, difficult clients, groups that don't go well, kids that fall sick just when you have a busy day, hubbies who complain you're away too much or working too hard. It's how you react that matters. You can't change the event, but you have the power to choose the response. What's your natural response? Stand in front of someone that you trust, and ask them to push you slightly on the shoulder. Do you resist? That's fight. Do you step back? Flight. Or do you stand rigid? Freeze. These are metaphors. Fight would be to retaliate, find another way to do what you need to do. Be resourceful. Flight would be to wail, oh, poor me, and try to get out of whatever you need to do. Freeze would be to do nothing and hope the problem goes away. It's up to you to choose, and it may well be a different choice depending on the situation. The point is that to randomly do this is not helpful. Let's go on to compelling outcomes. I always have in my mind my compelling outcome. It could be for the week, but it's always for the day, and I establish during my dog walk in the morning. By the time I get home, I have a plan for the day, which will include what has to be done, what I'd like to do for me, and what would be the icing on the cake, the bonus points. But there are terms and conditions involved. You have to be realistic. Assume you can do less than is possible to allow for thinking time. Structure the day to allow slots for different activities and keep to them. Include plenty of rewards. For me, that would be an hour at the gym, lunch with a friend, time to prepare a nice meal, perhaps. Include some downtime for coffee, lunch, tea. Use that time to catch up on social media, tweet, post an update, comment on someone else's post, email a potential client about an idea you have, a methodology you've just used that they might be interested in, something someone mentioned in another project that you think might be relevant to them. Eat something healthy. If you don't care about yourself, why would a client care about you? And exercise for the same reason. The things you have to do are defined as those things you cannot not do, such as finishing a report, but they don't include housework because you can do housework, but you don't have to. Setting compelling outcomes for your business. How much business do you want? How will you get it? Who do you want? What are your strategies? How are you putting yourself out there? What does your personal brand represent for clients? How do you communicate that? And what one thing could you do each day to help you meet your outcomes? Do it. This is another NLP technique that I think is very useful, and it's called the timeline. So let me tell you how to do it. Imagine a line along the floor from the start of your career or business until when you might retire. Now stand at a point on it that represents today. Acknowledge how you feel right now about where you are along that line. What's going well? What could be better? Now imagine you could hover above the line and look down on yourself. What do you see? Who do you see? This is called disassociating, and it's a good way of reflecting on yourself from a distance, taking the emotion out of the equation. Now take yourself to a place on the line where you either were in the past or will be in the future, really proud of yourself, happy, or whatever you want to feel that would represent success or achievement. At that place, close your eyes and associate into that feeling. Now, still squeezing your earlobe and holding on to this feeling, step towards your today point. At each step, acknowledge that you have the ability to feel like this today. There may be something you want to say to the you of today. Say it. Going on now to talk about rapport. This is about getting on with the respondents that you have in your focus group or your depth interview or whatever. Because we have to establish rapport fast, really fast. We need to get respondents on board. We need to be focused, committed to the task, interested and willing to share thoughts and feelings with complete strangers. So how do we do it? How do you do it? Have you ever dissected your skills, the things you do with excellence, unconsciously? And if like me, you've been doing them for many years, you may not be able to replicate the skill exactly. This is where modelling comes in. You model your own excellence. So here are a few NLP tips. Include visual, auditory and kinesthetic stimuli. Focus on what you want and communicate this as both a concept, big chunk, and then in detailed steps. Offer some choices for those who want them and explain the process for those who want that too. Manage your voice, tone and pace, match your body language. Pace to lead by breaking rapport to get attention. Use the feedback sandwich. What's really interesting is ... What I'd like to learn more about is ... Overall, we're really getting some good insight, aren't we? How you communicate with clients will depend on them rather than you. You may love to email, you may like to text or phone, but the only thing that matters is what they prefer. So think back to when you worked with them. Did they usually email? Did they call you? Did they text? Look back at what they wrote. How do they talk? What words come up? What phrases? What are their issues or concerns? Are they visual, auditory or kinesthetic? So somebody who's visual is someone who prefers to communicate visually using words like look, see, imagine, notice, watch. They speak fast as they access images from their mind and put them into words. Their pitch is quite high and slightly excited. They'll be great for pack design work, anything visual as they're quite arty. They will see brand imagery, fit and brand stretch as they have great imagination for what could be possible. So you could recruit them either using basic attitude statements, match their words and phrases. Auditory, somebody who prefers to communicate auditorily, really loves to talk. They use words like listen, hear, say. They're great for research where you want to stimulate a discussion, compare different views on a concept. They're also quite musical. People who are kinesthetic are fidgety and active, probably sporty. They don't have much patience and want to be doing something. Get them to write stuff, act out. They're good for task-related projects. If you go on now to detail and concept, because I think this is quite relevant for qualitative research, particularly because some people want to focus on the concepts and the bigger picture, but other people get slightly bogged down in detail, don't they? And you want different types of people for different projects. A big chunk person will be quite irritated by having to consider the detail of, the font size, the color, the shape. And a small chunk person will struggle to see the bigger picture. So you can chunk up by saying, so that means, and you can chunk down by saying, what makes you say that? You can also use a mind map to go from big chunk concept into detail. So to allow for both types, at the start of the group, tell respondents the main task of the group, which is big chunk, and then list the different things you'll be covering or ask them what you should be covering. You can then check these off against your list from the client and note which small chunk issues they haven't mentioned. Maybe those aren't so important. I also like to use quite a bit of hypnotic language. This works on the kids too, by the way. One way to do it is to say, I'm wondering how you feel about. Another one is, and when you know, what's that like? So another one might be, so when you're in the supermarket and you're thinking about what sauces to buy and you're wondering about the prices and what next? We are assuming the respondents want to know and that by gentle encouragement they will find the answer. Words like if suggest they have a choice. We may not want to give them a choice. In a kids group, I'd say, when you're all quiet, I'll show you the ad, not if you're all quiet. If you want to stay in rapport with a client whilst disagreeing, say yes and rather than yes but. For example, yes, and I'm wondering how that will affect the recruiting costs if we look for needles in haystacks. Use the yes tag. I expect you're wondering whether you should allow longer for me to write the report, aren't you? Managing time. There are 3 ways here. You can delegate, dump, or do. Delegate is to use virtual assistants, people like social media persons, kids that need work experience, and maybe another ICG member. Dumping means to say, if something doesn't meet one of your values, then just don't do it. And do those things that do meet your values, the things you get pleasure from, and the things that meet your compelling outcomes. So it's important to learn how to say no. And it's easier to do that, of course, if you are clear about what your values are. So maybe write them down. Write down what's important to you. Rephrase a value to allow yourself to accept a brief where if you're asked to do something that you didn't particularly want to do, to reframe it that it would be something that actually does have a learning there. Or maybe just say no. The point is that you've allowed yourself a choice, and having no choice can be stressful. You may recognize some of these words. I can't, I must, I should, I have to. Replace it with I could do this, or I could do that. When you're asked to do, sorry, I've done that bit. And so finally, the NLP communication model. On one side, you've got the external event, that thing that happens, and then it goes through the NLP process through the filters to generalize, distort, delete, the meta programs, which we talked about, the values, beliefs, decisions, memories, and then that results in an internal representation. It's what you have made of that external event, and this is your choice, basically. This gives you a state of being, how you're feeling, and that's reflected in your physiology, your body sense and body movements, etc., and how you look to the outside world. And that results in a behavior, because the mind and body are one. So my final thoughts: be clear who you are, what you stand for, what you want and what you need. Own your own space. Be fully present. You are okay, and when you're okay, others feel okay too. And when others feel okay, they will share. So imagine if you could capture the excellence in your team and share it about. How strong would your team be? So next steps. Well, you could train with me in NLP, face-to-face or Skype, read some of my books, book an NLP workshop for your team or a talk at your child's school or something like that. You could book some personal NLP coaching sessions. Or, of course, you can work with me on a qualitative research project and discover how NLP makes a difference. And lastly, if you've got it, flaunt it, I say. And so here are some of the books that I've written. So over to you, Arthur, and to any questions.
So, well, that was really fantastic run through of what is a huge topic, and it's not just about researchers; it's very much about us. What I wanted to do was to really start the process of Q&A by really, one of the most the sort of most recent charts you showed was how to say no. I don't know whether I'm the only one, but these days clients certainly do an awful lot to cram content into a focus group. And very often I would like to say, no, it's too long. You're asking too much. It's just far too long. And for those who are interested, I did a little video of this. If you check out my LinkedIn page, you can find it. It's all based on that Hitler film called Downfall, and it allows you to sort of put a different thing in. But it was all about having the discussion guide that was too long. Anyway, getting back onto the subject, how do you manage that with a client? Because you can see very clearly as a professional that this is far too long. I'm not saying the client isn't professional, but you've run more focus groups than they have. So you're looking at it and say, this is far too long. I'm not going to be able to do the job you want me to do. So how would you advise somebody to deal with that situation of how to say no?
Well, what I would do first of all is to focus on what I actually want rather than what I don't want, which is the too long bit. So when I'm talking to them before going into the focus group, if it's that situation and I've only just met them in the viewing studio, I would say, this is so interesting. I'd really like to know where you're particularly focused, and then what I'll just go through and mark those bits as being particularly of interest, and I'll also listen for the words that they're using. For example, on a recent Disney project, they were using a lot of words around being kinesthetic. How does this feel? And what's the sort of sense of it? What's the feeling that consumers get perhaps in a Disney store, for example? What's it like? So I then thought about ways to really tease that out in terms of, imagine you're at the door, imagine this. So a bit of visual, and also so you're walking in, getting the kinesthetic. So I prune down and focus really partly from hearing their words and also from a look at the guide and saying let's have a look at what we really want to focus on here.
Okay, that's good advice, thank you. We've had a comment in from Gwen DeLu. Lovely session, learnt a lot and feel supercharged. How about that?
Oh, that's nice.
And another comment from Sarah Mole, who says, wow, fantastic session, feeling very, very enthused, perfect start to the week. So that's all very good.
Oh, that's nice.
I've got Anna Hughes. Anna, I guess, is client side, and she says that this session was very much focused on agency side. How can NLP be used effectively client side?
That's an excellent question. I went into a bank actually to do a session with their team, and it was very interesting because what we did was we talked about models of excellence, and we did what's called a feedback lineup, where people sit opposite each other, and you're probably thinking it's quite scary. I think they thought so too at first, but and they had to say something that they've noticed in the other person working with them in their team that they really admire or are inspired by, and you go up the line saying one thing to each person, and then you'd be sat back down again. And the physiology of everybody was different. They'd had, if you like, a compliment, a feedback from every single person in their team that they wouldn't normally get. And you've got people sort of saying, gosh, I didn't realize that you really appreciated the way I did this, or, and they've learned sort of that somebody is really good on detail, or, say if somebody was getting feedback from quite a I really like the way you have this attention to detail. I really like your positivity. I really think this. And if somebody's really good at presentations, you do really good presentations. Could you actually talk me through how you do that? And so just that skill share and that modeling process of could you show me, could you help me, how do you do it, they were just really, really appreciative. And that was nothing to do with market research. It was about getting teams to really extract the best of who they are. And even when somebody can do something that is actually quite annoying, like, I don't know, the person who disturbs you in the middle of your writing an email or something, they've got your attention. That's annoying, but just imagine you could switch that and actually you could get the attention of, say, somebody who's dozing off in one of your presentations or a meeting. So what's their belief? Their belief is, what I have to say is more important than what you're doing. But if you could just snatch that belief and use it. So that's how you would use it,
You
client side.
need a certain amount of humility to do that, and also confidence, because that's really saying to somebody else, I recognize that you're better than me at, let's say, presenting. Please share that with me. Just require a fair amount of confidence. And I think it moves on to a question from Anamita Sharma, who first of all says, really useful, and you have been very prolific in your writing, very inspiring. But she then says, how does one realize one's own values?
Go back to the idea of the values, your own values. Tell you the way to do that is to think about the things that really get under your skin. It's almost like you look at it from the other side. What's the thing that really, like a red rag to a bull? Is it when somebody, I don't know, drops some litter in the street? Is it when somebody is insincere? Is it when somebody is a bit mean? Think of the things that really get your goat, and then that, if you flip it, what it means is that the opposite of that is your value. That's what you value.
And do you accept that? You just accept, well, those are my values and that's it?
Yeah.
Well, you may find that actually I don't like people very much, and here I am in this.
Oh, Arthur, I'm sure that's not the case. I can give you an example of a value that perhaps is quite a negative thing against me, is that I have a value about cooking food from scratch and eating healthily. As a result of that value, I don't do any food and fizzy drink research. Now, that's against me in the sense that I could probably, I could have clients in that field, but I won't do that because I feel that that's against a value. So I suppose that's how it might work, that if you don't actually agree with something, I don't feel I can genuinely commit to that sort of project 100%.
Yes, I know people certainly have done that within for example, the cigarette industry, and it's been a long-standing thing with many researchers that they choose not to do that. I've got a similar value to you regarding fresh food, but I've got a taste test coming up for, I won't tell you what the product is, but it's not a product that I would normally eat myself. But anyway, that's another thing. Ina.
But then that's actually, just if I can just say, that's very interesting. But that comes back to this curiosity. If it's something that you wouldn't eat yourself, you would then say, gosh, that's fascinating. So I wonder what it is about that product that makes somebody want to eat it. So you can choose to. It's about choice. This is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You can sort of say, well, but do you know what? I'd be really interested to know what it is about that product that people would want to, or you can say, no, that's not for me.
Well, I'm designing
the
questionnaire later today, so I think I'll probably include that in my thoughts. What really fascinates me about why people eat this stuff? Ina Armour-Brown, who's over in Holland, she says she hopes Taluna is listening. If they're not listening now, they'll certainly be listening to the recording. And she's asking, would they have those types of people in their panel? Auditory, visual, kinesthetic. I'm wondering.
Well, we do all have a preference. I mean, as you probably could tell from my presentation, mine's pretty kinesthetic and also quite auditory. And the thing is that some quite simple questions on a recruitment questionnaire could be used that would be specific to the project. So say if you were wanting to recruit visual people for, say, a project on pack design, for example, you would be thinking about, okay, well, I'm going to be asking them about color or font size or whatever. Color might be a good one because that's quite visual and it's also quite detailed. You might sort of put something in like sort of, when you're going out shopping, which of these sort of things is important to you? Is it about value? Is it about sort of the color of the clothes is it the whatever? You would pick questions that will actually elicit that sort of level of VAK. And it's really important, I think, because if you're wanting to, like with the project I was describing with the sort of a store, I might particularly want to recruit people who are quite kinesthetic, who are going to be able to be good at using sort of metaphors and being able to describe their feelings. But I might not need that for some projects.
So that's something for Taluna to think about as to whether, as part of their profiling, they could actually identify people who are perhaps more inclined towards any one of these particular aspects, and
Yes.
these researchers could perhaps select them.
Yeah. People do generally know. So I was going to say, people do generally know. If you ask somebody, are you somebody who tends to notice things that you see? Are you somebody who notices more sort of sounds, or are you somebody who sort of is more active and wanting to do stuff? I think, you know, all the audience here probably could straight away sort of think, well, yeah, actually, I'm like that, you know. So you can be all three things, because obviously, you know, I'm quite big chunk, but I have to be quite detailed about writing. You know, you've got to get your apostrophes and your commas in the right place. Well, I'm not sure I have in the presentation, but so sometimes you have to be quite detailed. So we need access to all three. But I'm saying that people have a preference, and so just to be aware of that when you're working with people in a team or in a meeting.
Sure. I've got a question from Alan Bowman, who says, "Thanks, Judy. It's interesting how much of this is instinctive, and that's perhaps why you miss it. Perhaps the difficulty is
So true.
identifying what the core skills or outcomes you want are. Any other tips on how to get through what seems to be instinctive?"
Yeah, it's a really good point, actually. Yes, I mean, the things that you do really, really well and you do with excellence, you often take for granted until you see other people falling off windsurfers or can't do cartwheels or whatever. Yeah, we take for granted what we do well, don't we? One way of doing that is you can talk to a colleague. This is why the idea of doing sort of work in a team is really good, or a sort of these feedback lineups, because people then find out what other people appreciate of them that they've perhaps completely taken for granted. So that can be a good way of doing it. Asking your friends, your family, what do you think what am I really good at? What can you rely on me for?
Mm.
Or just pick things that you do and then think, okay, so what does that mean that I'm good at? You know, if I could do this, that must mean this. You know, and sometimes it can be in your sport or whatever. You know, I play hockey, and one of the things I was trying to get better at was tackling, and I was asking somebody else on the team how do they do it, and so on. We got to talking about the ball, and she said, well, it's my ball and I want it back. Whereas my belief was that it was their ball and I was trying to get it off them. I was never going to be as good at tackling as she was, because of the difference in the belief. And so sometimes just finding somebody who does something really well, getting that belief is a good way to improve what you do and to be more aware of it.
Yes, that's a good advice. I shall send an email to Norwich City, who are playing Chelsea tomorrow evening, because I think for them to say yes, it's our ball rather than your ball, then we'll see. Anyway, another question coming in from Ina Armour Brown. In a call project, in what situation would you make it explicit up front that you're going to use NLP? Or is it not important to mention it, as the results will show your deeper insight? As you might make a
That's
difference in a bad world. So, yeah, so...
No, I would never mention it. I would never mention it, just in the same way as I would say, you know, what you bring to the project is you in your entirety, and it could be your humor, it could be your listening skills, it could be your ability to sum up, it could be the knowledge you have about lots of different stimuli. I mean, I remember Caroline Pakel did a brilliant session, didn't she, on the ICG? And it could be just your wealth of experience of using metaphors. You know, who we are is a sum of all of the skills and so on. So I wouldn't just pick out one and say, oh, you know, I've got NLP in my toolbox. I think we are so much more than those skills, where it's like, you know, Fritz Perls and the sort of Gestalt movement is we are more than the sum of our parts.
Yeah, and the Ina follows up actually with a clarification, which is that she's asking this in a context about jobs that maybe don't fit your values and the value of NLP in that situation.
Oh yes, if you have to do a job that doesn't fit your values, I think that's a tricky one. it's because I mean lots of us have had to do that, and I must say I was in a situation where I had to once, but I did actually leave because I was sort of not making myself ill, but I was getting so stressed. I wasn't at all happy, and it was having ramifications elsewhere. So yeah, I think if you possibly can have a job that meets your values, it's going to be much better for your health, because otherwise your health is affected by having to compromise your values, I think.
I think this is
so the only way.
Yeah, this is more to do with projects, though, isn't it? So you might have a project where the subject matter, I mean, maybe it's for an existing client, maybe an agency, okay? The agency,
Yeah.
the client, and the product or the service, whatever it is something you think, oh, I feel uncomfortable about this. And yet, of course, we always need the work, don't we?
Yes, I think if I was feeling uncomfortable about something from the start, I wouldn't do it. But if you absolutely have to, and I have had to in situations where you're working for an agency and the agency have taken on the project and you basically have to do it, then I would take on the belief that it must be fascinating in some way, and it might be about the process. It might be, well, how can I put an interesting process, an interesting exercise, a game, a task? Can we do a collage board? Could we do a bit of role play? Could we use some metaphors? So I would focus on the process perhaps rather than the content, on the basis that I'm going to learn so much by using these process things, even though the actual content may not. But then sometimes you can be surprised, can't you? Because you can take something on that you think, oh goodness, we're not sure about this one. And then actually you can be really surprised and say, well, this was really much more interesting than I thought. And that's great. That's a learning, isn't it? If you go into it open to sort of what can I learn from this, then I think you will learn stuff, and you can apply that then on the next project.
Gwen DeLu has asked, are we able to get the slides from the presentation? Well, yes, as always, the recording and the slides will be available on the ICG website. We'll send a note round to all the attendees and all the ICG members as well about that. And I've got an interesting question actually from Anamita Sharma to end on, I think. How do you NLP, using it as a verb, how do you NLP bankers back to work better and trustworthy? Maybe that's
what a good
the
one.
hypnotic bit at the moment. I don't know.
Yeah, I think you would use a bit of hypnotic language. Yes, gosh, I think that's way out of my my knowledge base. I can't help you on that. I think it would be a really interesting discussion, though, wouldn't it?
Yes, indeed. Okay, well, look, that's the end of the webinar, and I'd like to thank Judy for an excellent presentation on an area which I'm sure we'll be seeing a lot more of in years to come.